Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Cropper here. We shall now embark on Voltaire. We're going to partake of Candide. Now, just to let you know a few things about him. Now, just so to motivate you into why you would care about Voltaire and who he is and what he wrote, I'm going to go a little bit over his life. The World of Voltaire and Candide. This is a Barnes & Noble translation by Henry Morley. It was first translated in 1922. Candide was first published in 1759. Okay, The World of Voltaire and Candide. In 1694, Voltaire is born François-Marie Arouet, or Aru, or whatever the hell, in Paris on November 21st, 1694. So put Voltaire at the year 1700 minus 6. 1704, he enrolls in college at Louis-le-Grand, a Jesuit institution, where he studies classical literature and drama. Now, I just put that in there just to alert you to the Jesuits. What do you know about them? I've got a book on them called Men Astutely Trained. I haven't read it. I do know they're important, and I don't think they knew what they were doing. They did such a good Renaissance-style, Enlightenment-style education that they ended up creating students who were so brilliant as to throw off anything to do with religion. So one of the great fatalities of religion is that once in a while you forget to practice it all the way, and then things just fall apart. Okay, 1711. After leaving Louis-le-Grand, François pursues writing as a career despite his father's wishes that he study the law. 1714. To the dismay of his father, François meets with members and explores the ideology of the Radical Society of the Temple. I don't know what that is. He writes satirical poems also. Now it says here, it just asserts, it doesn't give the reason, that the royal court of France left in 1715, left the confined environment of Versailles to take up residence in the more liberal atmosphere of Paris, one of the events that marks the beginning of the Enlightenment in France. Again, that was 1715. 1717, Voltaire was imprisoned in the Bastille for a year, for 11 months, after the Duke of Orleans, whatever, wrongly accuses him of writing 2 libelous poems about the French government. Wrongly accuses him. I don't know. In prison, he writes his first dramatic tragedy, Oedipe, O-E-D-I-P-E, his version of the Oedipus myth, and La Henriade, an epic poem about Henry IV of France. He did that in prison, kind of like Machiavelli, who wrote The Prince while he was in prison. In 1719, François-Marie Arouet assumes the pen name Voltaire. He was about 27 years old at that time. The pen name Voltaire. I asked some people at a bar if they knew Voltaire's first name, and they didn't. Then I asked some more people a few days later, saying, I'm a prankster. I play practical jokes. They think that I'm just some gentleman who has Voltaire in my mind. I say, excuse me, folks, you wouldn't happen to remember his first name, would you? But actually, I'm a philosophical terrorist, spreading havoc in New York, confounding people with Voltaire's first name. No, it is his pen name. So if that joke comes around to you, now you know how to answer it. He didn't have a first name, so that was his pen name. Voltaire is sent to the Bastille for the second time in 1726, for the act of challenging the Chevalier de Rohan to a duel. After 2 weeks, he is offered exile as an alternative and emigrates to England. Now, Voltaire was not that high up in society, so to challenge the Chevalier de Rohan to a duel is he's stepping out of his bounds. So he goes to England in exile, where he spends the next 2.5 years learning English and studying the philosophies of the philosopher John Locke and mathematician and physicist Isaac Newton. So he goes to England and gets Locke and Newton as big influences early in his life, mid in his life. He also attends productions of the plays of William Shakespeare. Yes, he was a contemporary, virtually, of Shakespeare. Now we skip quite a bit from 1728 to 1738, we're not looking at any of that, through the influence of Madame de Pompadour, Louis XV's mistress, Voltaire is appointed the Royal Historiographer of France in 1745. He is elected to the prestigious French Academy in 1746. Now, it keeps going on. That's about enough. But in 1778, one last note, Voltaire returns to Paris, where he is welcomed by the public. On May 30th, he dies at the age of 84. So just got back to Paris to die. Now, the introduction by Gita May, G-I-T-A-M-A-Y, it has some interesting things. We're going to go ahead and go over some of that before we get to the text of Candide itself. Voltaire would probably have been both pleasantly surprised as well as bemused by the exceptional and enduring popularity of Candide, that's what we're reading here, which he viewed as one of his minor works, unworthy to vie with his tragedies, historical essays, and epic philosophical poems, on which he staked his posthumous reputation. Now, if you want to get deeper into Voltaire, I hope to add to this series. I hope to do Candide and then other stuff. I hope to have a long series on Voltaire. But if you want to jumpstart me on that, jump ahead. Go and get his tragedies, historical essays, epic and philosophical poems, etc. Now, by the time Voltaire died at the age of 81, he had become, quote, the most illustrious author of his age, under his chosen pen name Voltaire. This name he adorned with the article D, D-E, a common practice among writers of bourgeois origin with aristocratic aspirations. See, he was lowly, but aspired. He was a climber. Before and even after the French Revolution, as Beaumarchais, I don't know, and Balzac could attest. I do have some Balzac. I haven't read it. Shame I don't have it with me. He took little interest in his ancestry. It was probably because he deemed it of no special historical or cultural significance. Yeah, because maybe if he was higher up the social ladder, he would have taken more interest in it. But maybe he was honest enough to not think he needed that. Maybe even if he were higher up in the ladder, he still wouldn't have thought anything of his ancestry. At the age of 10, we skipped quite a ways. At the age of 10, young Arouet was placed at the renowned Jesuit college Louis le Grand in the Latin Quarter, where he received a solid education in the classics, where his knowledgeable and supportive masters nurtured his precious interest and talent in drama and poetry, and where he formed lifelong friendships with some of his classmates. I'll skip half a page. In 1718, he had his first great success with his tragedy Oedipe, O-E-D-I-P-E, his version of the Oedipus myth, now famous by Sophocles, and also treated by Pierre Corneille, the great 17th century French dramatist. Stick that in your pocket. The triumph of his play induced him in 1719 to leave his bourgeois origins behind, once and for all, by adopting the more euphonious and aristocratic pen name de Voltaire. Meanwhile, he had already gotten a rather bitter taste of old regime justice, because Louis XIV was austere and oppressively religious, so he had already come up against some problems with that. As the author of satirical verses directed against the regent, he was forced to spend 11 months in the infamous Bastille. We already talked about that a bit. Then in 1726, an incident occurred that would mark the turning... Now, it was 1717 to 18 he was in the Bastille. 1726, an incident occurred that would mark the turning point in his life and his career. Voltaire quarreled with the Chevalier d'Oran, scion of the most powerful French families, who had his lackeys beat him up for blatantly assuming an aristocratic name. The young writer failed to gather support among his aristocratic friends in his desperate attempts to find redress in a duel with the Chevalier. So he was beaten up by the Chevalier's thugs because of the name he assumed. Then he wanted to duel the Chevalier, who persistently refused to honor a mere commoner with his distinction. Instead, he was once more hustled off to the Bastille, but after a 2-week stay was offered the